Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about a topic of deep concern to me in the critical profession and anybody who's interested in music criticism or criticism more generally. It's this: has criticism become too nice? Or, to put it more specifically, there's a splendid new article in the New Yorker that isn't about me. Well, there are splendid articles that aren't about me. Few, but they exist. Here's the point. It's by critic-at-large, Kalefa Sanneh, and it's called How Music Criticism Lost Its Edge. Oh, it's really a terrifically delicious topic. But the interesting thing is that it's entirely about popular music. Now, I understand classical music is a tiny little niche and nobody cares about it. I get it. But I still cringe whenever I hear people say music and they specifically only mean pop music of various kinds and ignore classical music and other types as well. Sanneh is one of those, and that's okay. I mean, that's perfectly fine. It's what he does. But he makes the case that in the world of popular music criticism, everything is just nice. People are encouraged to be nice. Pop artists object to it when people aren't nice. And it really is, I thought this was a problem in classical music. And I have to say, when I started writing criticism in the 80s, and I was writing for the audio magazines like High Fidelity and Stereo Review and those people, and then, Classic CD and Digital Audio and, all those audio / review magazines. Record reviews were part of the larger mission. And those magazines covered all genres of music. And I knew the popular music critics. And when I was working in radio at WJHU and at KDFC in San Francisco, whatnot, the pop music people, well, KDFC not so much, but WJHU, the pop music and the alternative music people and the classical music people, we were all just a giant stew of smarminess and wonderful nastiness and sardonicism and snideness and all those virtues in a critic. And, we just chatted and shared ideas and music, and it was all great. But the magazines all tanked, and the music industry fragmented even more, if that were possible, than had been going on in the 70s and 80s. And I, anyway, lost track of what was going on in the world of pop music. I mean, I don't read pop music reviews because they are now no longer part of a larger magazine. They're just dedicated pop music things, right? I mean, the Village Voice, remember, used to do both and stuff like that. But all that stuff is gone now. It's all vanished. And so everything is in its own little bubble. And we don't cross over as much. But I learned from this article, which is absolutely a revelation, is that the same shit that's happening in classical music is going on in pop music, only with more scatological language. But it's basically the same thing, which is that there's this universe of anodyne, soi-disant critics, and everybody has an opinion, and everybody thinks that all opinions are equal. Here's a news flash: they're not. And that, and that criticism which is mean or harsh or vicious or waspish or cynical is somehow a crime. That everyone's supposed to be nice to everybody. Oh, that's so wrong. That's such a terrible idea. Because the whole purpose of criticism is to engender commentary and thought and reaction and mental activity. And when everything is just blandly nice, none of that happens. None of it happens at all. And then everything is simply controlled by PR people, by the artists' publicity machines. And I saw this happening. I saw it happening. I've mentioned this story before, but back when I was in the 80s, when I went, I'll never forget, on one of the magazines I was writing for, remember there were a whole bunch of magazines that existed, besides like, High Fidelity and CD Review, the old standbys, but all these digital audio magazines, and everybody started these magazines because the major labels had money. Lots of money, and they were investing it in advertising because, the digital music revolution brought in, everybody was rebuying their collection and everyone was awash in funds. And so these magazines got started to take advantage of that. And their primary goal was to suck up advertising revenue, much as Gramophone still does, for example. And that was also true of other magazines like Fanfare and whatnot. They were reviews, and the reviews were okay. I edited Fanfare for a while. I hope the reviews were okay. But there was a tremendous amount of pressure not to say anything mean because it would cost the magazine advertising. Nowadays, that's not really an issue, the advertising issue. I'm not sure about popular music, how much money goes into advertising or where it goes. But the damage was done. There was a tendency to muzzle critics because if a label wanted to advertise a particular recording and it sucked, and we said it sucked, well, obviously, what was the point of them advertising? They wouldn't. And then as the record industry got smaller and smaller and smaller and started to self-destruct, particularly in classical music, the kitty, the pot dried up. And so the magazines were competing for more, for an ever smaller vanishing pool of advertising revenue. And that made the pressure even greater on the editorial side not to say anything controversial or unpleasant. It really did. And I was there. I lived through all this, and it was awful. And then eventually all these magazines tanked. They all disappeared, all of them, except for a select couple that are, subsidized somehow or, supported by, some, rich person or rich conglomerate of something that just likes having them for whatever reason. But essentially they disappeared. And serious criticism went down the toilet with them. And I had no idea that this was going in pop music. I mean, my own Waterloo, as I was trying to get to before I just got distracted, was at a new release party that EMI hosted. And I remember it was the year that Ionesco's Oedipe was issued on EMI with Jose Van Dam and Mariana Lipovcek. I go by the records. I have no idea what year that was, but I remember the records. Anyway, that was one of the new releases. I was very excited about it. Anyway, our editor was there, and he was a moron. I mean, he was a moron at the best of times, but he outdid himself at this meeting. He raised his hand and said to the presenters, "Why don't you just tell us what the good recordings are so we can feature those?" And I mean, even the presenters didn't know what to say. But it was like the end of criticism, as an art form, which requires there to be, critical things and how you say it. If you can do a really good trashing, it's almost a lost art, one which I have tried to revive, and certain others in the profession. But anyway, in this delicious article in the New Yorker, there's a discussion of one of the few pop music critics who still lets people have it. And it's a guy named Anthony Fontano, and he has a website called The Needle Drop, which has like 3 million subscribers, as opposed to my pitiful little site. He's got billions of people because he talks about music. He says music, which is pop music. And I've been watching his videos. I've been looking at them, and he's marvelous. He bills himself as, I think, the music nerd or something like that. But he's funny, and he's from Connecticut, which is always a recommendation. He went to Southern Connecticut State College. My mother was a professor there. Can't get better than that. So we're in the same territory. He's younger than I am, quite a bit, I think. And he knows an astronomical amount about popular music, and he talks more about, pop music is more artist based. Of course, we're composer based in a way, so the slant is a little different. But he's not afraid to go after something that he thinks is crap. But what really impresses me when I watch his reviews is that they're really about the music. He talks about new releases track by track, and he talks about whether they're mixed correctly, whether the balances are appropriate, whether the quality of the music. Whether you agree or disagree is not the point. The point is that when I watch his videos about pop music artists who I've never heard of, I want to hear them. I want to hear what he's talking about. And it's just a wonderful thing. I mean, there are other, I felt so happy that there are other critics out there who are still doing what I consider to be criticism. Real, honest, goodness, serious criticism. And so, whether or not you like popular music or care about popular music, if you care about criticism, go take a look at the Needle Drop and go watch some of Anthony Fontano's videos. You'll see a really serious critic at work with a style and a character and a personality and knowledge and the willingness to call it as he hears it. Gosh, it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. I think I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time with Mr. Fontano. I hope he has an opportunity to watch maybe little old me once in a while too, because good criticism, real criticism, is a vanishing art, and it cheers me to no end. It doesn't matter what form it is, that there is criticism out there somewhere still. It's finding a new format, a new way to reach people. And I am so happy to be part of that, if indeed I am, or that's how it's seen. You should read that New Yorker piece too. It's really, I think, really, really important, because how are we ever going to have a healthy arts culture, whatever the art is, whatever kind of music it is, unless there can be informed dialogue? I don't see it happening. And so this was very, very exciting for me, and I hope it may interest some of you too. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.